Bill trying to manage Hayley'S birth control is not romance, not concern, and definitely not leadership. It's control dressed up as a storyline. For all its relentless appetite for contrivance, the show occasionally stumbles into something resembling sincerity, most notably in the quiet exchange between Anita and Andre, a rare moment with enough emotional gravity to cut through the usual noise. Naturally, that brief flash of humanity is immediately followed by Bill deciding he now gets an opinion on Hayley'S contraception, as though controlling the narrative is not quite satisfying enough without controlling her body as well. Meanwhile, the production continues its inexplicable devotion to staging every private conversation directly in front of Shanice's nursing station, with Shanice positioned as a mandatory audience member because nothing says discretion like a captive listener in a workplace corridor. Add Leslie's persistently grating delivery, and the experience starts to feel less like drama and more like a test of endurance. The sharpest line of the episode, Danny's booster seat and crayons jab aimed at Hayley, lands because it articulates what the plot keeps insisting everyone politely ignores: a steady infantilization of certain characters paired with a shameless tolerance for their behavior. And that tolerance is nowhere more glaring than in the show's lopsided relationship economy, where the men specialize in performance-level devotion, while the women are largely excused from reciprocity. Vernon is forever catering to Anita, who is quick to declare how exceptional her partner is, yet is rarely shown returning the effort. Jacob bends himself into a pretzel for Naomi, who apparently considers emotional labor an optional add-on. Ted's orbit around Nicole has become a revolving door, now joined by an ex-friend and another doctor competing for her approval, as if she is the prize and they are the applicants, while Nicole, conveniently, remains exempt from proving anything to anyone. Tomas continues to operate as a polished snake, whisking Kat off for weekend getaways despite Kat's transparent lack of interest, raising the obvious question of what she contributes besides passive participation. Even Andre, despite his evident growth, is still required to move on Danny's timetable and under Danny's conditions, though, to her credit, Danny does show signs of recognizing his worth, even going so far as to build new family memories with him. The lone inversion of the pattern is Hayley, the only woman shown actively catering to a man, Bill. Yet the show makes it impossible to read as genuine, given the constant sense of calculation and the inconvenient fact that Bill's history of cheating on Danny makes him spectacularly undeserving of any devotion, heartfelt or otherwise. As if that were not enough, Hayley and Randy conduct their suspicious meetings in public, now even involving Bill's shiny new client, and the narrative expects disbelief at the idea that no one ever notices, because this universe apparently has crowds but no eyes. The episode also toys, again, with Anita's health storyline, underscoring how needless her isolation is. If Vernon truly is her heart and soul, secrecy is not devotion. It is self-sabotage, and the insistence on suffering alone reads as manufactured drama rather than character truth. Hayley and Leslie, for their part, share at least one admirable skill. An impressive collection of aliases that suggests identity is more a hobby than a fact. And hanging over it all is the unresolved business between Vernon and Sharon, which the show keeps teasing as though closure were optional, an unfinished thread treated like a minor inconvenience rather than a central rupture. Malone, at least, stands out as an actual veteran presence, the rare figure with credibility that does not need to be announced. Then comes the question the script keeps avoiding. If the sexual dimension were removed, what exactly remains between Andre and Danny besides habit, proximity, and the occasional heartfelt breakthrough? Perhaps that is why the show compensates by keeping them in bed so often it starts to feel less like intimacy and more like set dressing. At this rate, the only surprise is the absence of an imminent twin pregnancy subplot. And when an episode still manages to feel dull despite all this maneuvering, it is not for lack of material. It is because the series prefers spectacle and repetition to consequence, keeping the audience tethered to moments of genuine emotion while refusing to let the rest of the story earn them. Stop calling Eva the problem if you refuse to hold Kat to the same standard. Calling Eva evil while granting Kat a moral hall pass is a neat trick, one that only works if consistency is not part of the viewing experience. Both operate with imperfections, both maneuver, and both make choices that look noble only when framed by favoritism. Kat's instincts about Eva were not wrong. Something was off, and the suspicion landed where it should have. The problem is what happened after the truth started taking shape. Once the something became clear, the vigilance curdled into something less principled and more possessive. The issue stopped being what Eva was doing and became who Eva was, a rival candidate for Ted's attention. Nothing sharpens a grudge like the fear of being replaced, especially when it is dressed up as righteousness. Eva, meanwhile, did not enter the family dynamic as a cartoon villain twirling a mustache. She arrived carrying a lifetime of hurt fed by lies, and then discovered, rather inconveniently, that Ted and Nicole were not the monsters her mother painted. That creates an unglamorous conflict: loyalty to the one person she believed loved her versus protecting people she was taught not to trust. Yes, warning them about her mother would have been the clean, heroic option. It also would have required betting everything on compassion from a family that had no reason to offer it, while publicly turning on the only anchor she thought she had. Morality is easier when there is guaranteed emotional safety. This situation offered none. That does not absolve Eva of her mess. Sleeping with Tomas reads less like romance and more like retaliation with plausible deniability. A tidy tit-for-tat when tension with Kat had already become the default setting. Tomas's appeal is obvious enough. Attentive, caring, and pointedly interested in what was troubling her, not merely in maintaining polite distance. The timing, however, is what makes it look transactional. It is hard to call it healing when it functions so efficiently as a provocation. Ted's role in all of this remains the show's quiet irony. The distance between him and Kat is treated as his failing, yet the record shows a more complicated pattern. Kat initially refused communication, and even now resists any meaningful attempt at reconciliation, whether with her father or eventually with Eva. Her feelings may be valid, her strategy is not. There are only so many ways to handle uncomfortable truth. Keep skipping family events, keep nursing the outrage, keep widening the gap, or do the adult work of showing up and dealing with what is real. If a relationship is going to be repaired, it will not happen on principle alone. It takes effort, and in this case, effort from both Kat and Eva. The most biting possibility is that they could actually learn from each other if Pride did not keep auditioning for the lead role. Elsewhere, the emotional core lands with Anita and Andre, because tenderness remains a rare commodity in a cast that treats vulnerability like a negotiable weakness. Anita's compassion for Andre cuts through the noise precisely because she is carrying her own burdens and still chooses to recognize his pain. The worry over her test results adds stakes that do not rely on scandal or petty one-upmanship, and the quiet consensus is clear. The show functions better when its queen is not being written into a medical cliffhanger. Then there is Leslie, who continues to prove that alcohol is not required for chaos. It merely shortens the runway. Pairing her with Detective Marcel is the kind of match that suggests the narrative has finally decided to stop indulging her and start containing her. The public, passionate kiss, especially from a married detective, does not read as romance so much as poor judgment performed with confidence. It begs the obvious question if Marcel is collecting information to put Leslie away. Is he doing it as an investigator or as a man who cannot decide whether he is interrogating a suspect or auditioning for the scandal himself? Either way, the inevitability hangs in the air. She is spiraling, he is circling, and the only suspense is whether he will actually follow through. Bill rounds out the episode with the kind of wistful regret that arrives a few decades late, but still expects applause for punctuality. Watching him tumble through memory, especially the warmer moments with Danny, and the flash of a younger Bill learning he is going to be a father, lands because it briefly humanizes a man who often behaves like consequences are optional. It is heartwarming, yes, and also quietly damning, The tenderness proves he was always capable of better, which makes the years of doing worse feel less tragic and more chosen. And somewhere in the background, Hayley remains blissfully unaware, the sort of character who could be toppled by a stiff breeze, because denial has become her primary coping mechanism. The warning signs are not subtle, they are practically set to music. The only surprise left is how long the illusion will be allowed to stand before it collapses on schedule. Stop calling this chemistry. It is just recycled connections with better lighting. Leslie and Marcel, Bill and Danny, Val and Hayley, Lynette and Randy. An impressive lineup, mostly of criminals, with Danny apparently cast as the lone exception, perhaps to prove the show understands contrast. Leslie, meanwhile, looks as though she stepped directly out of a funeral parlor and forgot to change before filming, which is fitting for a character who treats every room like a wake for someone else's dignity. The pairing of Andre and Danny remains genuinely compelling, right up until the story insists on turning it into a biological negotiation, because nothing says romance like the blunt reality that Andre wants children, and Danny is not positioned as the partner for that future. And then there is Hayley, a walking cautionary tale receiving exactly the outcome earned. Bill wanted another baby, naturally, because a man who cannot manage a relationship should absolutely manage a newborn. He keeps trying to recreate what he had with Danny, as if nostalgia is a fertility plan. It is not. The constant memory lane strolling with Danny serves no purpose beyond confirming that Bill's favorite relationship is the one where he gets to be the main character in his own revisionist history. The larger issue is less romance and more relational entanglement as a hobby. Every love story and side interest seems engineered to pass through a relative, a spouse's connection, or a best friend's orbit. Because why build chemistry when a family tree can do the heavy lifting? Bill and Hayley begin as an extension of her friendship with Naomi, which now reads less like love and more like an elaborate scam dressed as destiny. Danny's new relationship, being tied to Nicole's husband's nephew, becomes a public spectacle, complete with moral outrage and courtroom-level interrogation. Yet when Ted and Nicole split, the same righteous energy conveniently evaporates while Nicole dates Ted's best friend. Evidently, the show's ethical code is not a code so much as a mood. Then comes the Kat-Eva-Tomas situation, where Eva knew Kat and Tomas were involved and still proceeded to develop feelings and sleep with him, because boundaries are apparently optional if the plot needs momentum. Eva's next love interest, being Jacob's brother, is framed as less objectionable, largely because there are fewer direct ties to weaponize, which is a bleak standard for progress. Joey and Vanessa take it even further. Vanessa falls for a man suspected of being involved in her husband's death, all while carrying the uneasy awareness that something is off. As if that were not enough, she was also sleeping with him, knowing her husband owed him an enormous debt, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, because nothing says emotional safety like a romantic lead who doubles as a financial crisis. Yes, the show is entertaining. It is also slickly unsettling in its fixation on intimacy that circles back into the same social bloodstream. The relationships rarely feel organic. They feel engineered to be just connected enough to be shocking without requiring new characters or fresh dynamics. Even the comparatively normal situations are treated with casual cruelty. Shanice, notably, is repeatedly positioned as the convenient rebound when other romances collapse. First Derek, tangled up in his history with Ashley, and now Ted, still dripping with fallout from Nicole. Shanice does not cause the chaos. She merely absorbs it, as the show uses her as emotional spare change. And when the writing finally pauses the romantic carousel, it lands on what actually works. Anita, well done, is not generosity. It is accuracy. She gave Andre exactly what he needed. And the Anita and Andre conversation is the kind of grounded human scene the show too often avoids. Their moments together are genuinely moving, elevated by strong performances, particularly Sean Freeman, and reinforced by Anita's consistent presence, including outfits that never miss. Anita and Vernon also register as a pairing with real texture, which is rarer than it should be in a series obsessed with interpersonal contamination. Elsewhere, the so-called two criminals in crime together, Leslie and Malone, are positioned like competing strategists with dueling agendas, and the show clearly enjoys watching them circle each other. The detective and Leslie being made for each other tracks perfectly. Both operate like professionals who treat deception as a love language. Danny, at least, is finally free from Bill, and Bill's visible regret, watching Hayley and Danny as if silently asking how everything went so wrong, lands as the punchline it deserves to be. The shiny new model was not what it promised, and the cost was higher than his ego calculated. Still, basic competence remains elusive. Watching the Three Stooges convene in a public place, casually risking exposure, is the kind of plot convenience that does not build tension. It insults it, and the show's continued insistence on dragging Bill and Danny back into memory lane dialogue begs the obvious question: what is the point? Besides reminding viewers that the past is Bill's favorite place to live, because it does not require him to change. Stop trying to force Danny and Bill. It's not romantic. It's narrative laziness with good lighting. The most compelling material arrives whenever Andre is placed in the orbit of the Duprees, scenes that are not merely well acted, but written with the kind of emotional precision soap operas routinely promise and rarely deliver. Andre is allowed to be vulnerable without being infantilized, and the Duprees respond with love that feels lived in rather than performative. It lands with the quiet force of a family actually behaving like one. It is the sort of character work that other shows ration like an endangered resource, and the closest recent comparison is the Chelsea-Billy stretch on The Young and the Restless last year. The difference is that Andre's storyline does not just work, it sings, and the performance warrants serious awards consideration. Anita, in particular, proves that tenderness can still be dramatic. The moment at the door, the unspoken weight of a biopsy, and the obvious hesitation to tell Vernon before being interrupted all build toward a diagnosis reveal that now feels inevitable and, inconveniently, devastating. The Anita-Andre exchange is the kind of true-life scene that disarms even the most hardened viewer, down to the small physical details. His attention to her hand on his arm reads like a character realizing in real time that safety still exists. If the series insists on making people cry, it could do worse than continuing to earn it. And then, naturally, the show pivots to romantic chaos with the subtlety of a siren, a soon-to-be divorced husband escorted by his ex-wife, as though that arrangement has ever ended in calm resolution. Against that backdrop, the Danny and Andre pairing has become the relationship the narrative actually knows how to write: warm, believable, and worth rooting for. So the repeated effort to steer Danny back toward Bill feels less like storytelling and more like stubborn self-sabotage. The reported plan to write Danny's pregnancy into the plot only raises the stakes. If the show is committing to a Danny-Andre baby, it should stop treating Danny-Bill as a default setting. Also, wardrobe has quietly become part of the viewing experience. Danny's earrings deserve immediate identification, if only to provide one uncomplicated win in a universe allergic to peace. Meanwhile, Hayley'S storyline continues its march toward reckoning. She has met her match, a new arrival appears poised to detonate her carefully curated life, and the so-called partner in crime operates with the single-minded efficiency of someone who always seems to know exactly where to be. Because, of course, the con game implications around Randy, Hayley, and an additional accomplice are no longer subtext. They are practically a business plan, and the only mystery is how the Duprees have managed not to notice Randy and Hayley together. Not every production choice earns applause. The casting for younger versions of Bill and Danny is conspicuously unconvincing, performers who neither resemble the characters nor convincingly echo them, which defeats the entire purpose of the device. By contrast, the writing occasionally shows a surprising commitment to intelligence and texture. The mention of Charlotte E. Ray signals an effort to integrate culture and history rather than merely gesture at it, and that deserves credit. The show also understands the value of well-placed continuity nods, such as the Michael Baldwin, Lauren Fenmore reference, tied to Chelsea's Christmas gift. which plays like a wink that rewards long-time genre literacy without derailing the plot. Some of the sharpest entertainment, however, comes from the writer's willingness to let characters be pointedly funny in ways that fit. The Pepe Le Pew jab, the complaint about a stiff neck from perpetually looking up at Bill, and the thrift store digs are all doozies precisely because they sound like things these people would say. The actors deserve praise, but the writers deserve equal respect for crafting humor that is character-consistent rather than desperate. The interpersonal chessboard keeps widening. Curiosity lingers around Marcel's motive for attaching himself to Leslie, and the dynamic reads less like romance and more like strategy. Nicole's situation is its own cautionary tale. Carlton registers as off, trying too hard in ways that rarely signal good intentions, and there is a quiet hope that he does not hurt her. At the same time, the logic is hard to ignore. If Nicole can entertain Carlton, then Carlton can certainly entertain Shanice, and Shanice would not indulge Leslie's instability by playing along with it. Ted, for his part, remains a good man with an old, serious mistake, yet still capable of romancing Nicole with alarming effectiveness, while also occupying the role of one of the most disengaged parents in daytime television history alongside Nicole, which is an achievement no one should aspire to. If Ted and Shanice do become inevitable, Nicole's outrage will require restraint. A woman positioned as Ms. Christmas Picnic does not get to police other people's choices while sleepwalking through her own responsibilities. And beneath all of it sits the creeping problem the series must address. It needs to spice things up because the pacing has started to drift toward boredom, leaving viewers waiting for the proverbial gates to open. Kat and Eva at least provide a clean moral contrast. Kat was willing to sacrifice her own father's business to strike at Eva, potentially hemorrhaging money in the process, while Eva chose repair over exposure by fixing the problem rather than immediately telling Ted, a decision that reads like an attempt at reconciliation rather than conquest. In other words, the show already has the ingredients for sharp drama. The only remaining question is whether it plans to use them or simply admire them from across the room. Here's the part the show expects everyone to ignore. Carlton isn't a love interest. He's a boundary violation with good lighting. 30 years of friendship is supposed to mean something, yet the story is currently flirting with the idea that a best friend can date, kiss, or otherwise get intimate with a husband or ex-husband, and everyone should simply applaud the emotional maturity on display. An interesting standard, particularly for Nicole, who is being nudged toward Carlton as if basic boundaries are an optional accessory. The geography adds its own layer of incoherence. Nicole references New York-level freezing weather, while the dialogue insists the characters are in the DMV area. Either the setting is being treated as a flexible concept, or the script has decided that DMV is a mood rather than a region. Then there is the central insult, Nicole entertaining Carlton at all. Ted's history is already a masterclass in betrayal, an affair, a child, and the kind of chaos that permanently stains a family structure. Even with the convenient explanation that Ted did not know Leslie kept the baby, the damage remains. But the point is not whether Ted is flawed. The point is that Leslie was not Nicole's friend, not her business partner, not the person smiling in her face while circling her marriage. Carlton, however, is framed as Ted's best friend since college turned business partner, precisely the category of person who should be permanently off limits. Watching Nicole contemplate him reads less like complicated healing and more like a woman being written into a humiliation ritual. And Carlton does not exactly inspire confidence. The timing and proximity suggest a man who has been patiently waiting for access, smiling politely while counting the days. The grass is greener temptation is being set up, but the grass in question appears to be full of snakes, and Carlton is not hiding in it so much as introducing himself. Meanwhile, Eva sits at a table with Ted and announces, with remarkable self-importance, she's afraid of me, while discussing Kat. Afraid of what exactly? The writing keeps insisting Eva's presence is automatically intimidating, as if confidence is a superpower instead of a personality trait. Kat's reactions may be many things it gives, but fear's an oddly melodramatic diagnosis. The supporting cast continues to do what soap world supporting casts do: treat other people's lives as communal property. Shanice, in particular, is chronically stationed at the metaphorical nurse's station, collecting information and inserting herself into situations that do not require her. Vanessa's strategy is even less subtle, leaning hard into desperation as though intensity can substitute for dignity. Of course, this is soap opera logic, where half the people mentioned are never seen. Domestic staff, relatives, and conveniently off-screen connections exist solely to patch narrative holes. The problem is that the standards for on-screen judgment are not equally imaginary. Nicole is being dragged for dating Carlton, while Ted's behavior, inviting himself to Shanice's home and generally moving through other people's boundaries, barely earns a whisper. The moral outrage is apparently reserved for women who make questionable choices, not men who make habitual ones. That imbalance becomes even more glaring when comparing Nicole and Eva. Nicole can pursue Ted's best friend and business partner, and the debate becomes whether it is distasteful. Eva is treated as morally damned for involvement with Tomas, despite the fact that Kat never properly claimed her as a sister. If accountability were consistent, it would at least be predictable. Instead, it is selective, sentimental, and aggressively gendered. Kat, for her part, appears constitutionally unable to be happy for anyone, especially Tomas. The writing is laying groundwork for her to lose him through sheer lack of support for his career. Disliking Tomas does not change the basic expectation. Partners back each other. Kat is not backing. She is obstructing. And the relationship is being steered toward the inevitable consequences. Ted's contempt for Kat is barely concealed. When Martin brings up Kat, Ted responds as if Kat's words are automatically suspect, yet he turns around and accepts Eva and Leslie's versions of events with minimal scrutiny. The message is clear. Kat is not to be trusted, not to be respected, and certainly not to be given the benefit of the doubt. Add that to Ted's established resume as an awful husband and an awful father, and the portrait is complete. The bond with Junior is not portrayed as a father-child relationship at all. It is a package deal controlled by Leslie, along with the unavoidable gravitational pull of Leslie's mother. Junior comes with Leslie, and Ted is simply allowed visitation in the margins. Some of the sharpest writing actually appears in small moments. Leslie shutting down Samantha in the restaurant, branding it grown folks talk, and effectively ordering her away, landed with the kind of cold authority soaps love. The moment even carried a pointed cultural echo, reminiscent of the classic cinematic gesture of quiet retaliation in The Color Purple. It was precise, it was loaded, and it was far more memorable than yet another round of moral lectures about who is allowed to date whom. If the story wants to evolve rather than recycle, there are obvious lanes. Introducing Tomas's family, especially a financially established army brother or cousin, would give Kat a mirror she cannot talk her way out of, forcing a real confrontation with immaturity and insecurity. Jacob needs a DC-relevant storyline that is current and grounded. Missing children, carjackings, fentanyl deaths, identity theft, something that turns him into a capable professional instead of a roving argument factory. Anita's breast cancer scare could become more than a plot tremor by connecting her with less fortunate patients and leading to Samantha's Sanctuary, a support resource for lower-income residents. Eva and Isaiah should be allowed to develop without forced theatrics, an against-all-odds arc that reveals genuine change and a real stake in family acceptance. And if Ted and Shanice are going to happen, the pace should remain slow and unnervingly natural. Two people realizing the truth too late, confessing love on Valentine's Day, while across town, Thomas wins Lynette's case, and Lynette repays the favor by exposing Hayley and Randy to Bill before fleeing. As for 2026 predictions, the most plausible arrival is Dante, appearing right on cue to demand a cut of Leslie's money, because nothing says New Year like a fresh round of opportunism. And if Leslie continues handing out nicknames, such as calling Naomi Nay, it will remain one of the few character habits that is both consistent and oddly charming. The same woman who can weaponize a room can also brand people with a name and make it stick. The show could do worse than lean into that, preferably while remembering what boundaries are supposed to look like when the plot stops pretending they are negotiable. Kat isn't the problem, she's the only adult in the room, and the show keeps punishing her for it. Parents discussing their children is not inherently scandalous. The scandal is pretending context does not exist. Eva arrived less than a year ago and managed to leave a trail of genuine wreckage almost immediately. And Nicole and Ted's marriage did not collapse through spontaneous combustion, especially with a mother who has never met a boundary she did not feel entitled to move. Kat recognized Eva's presence for what it was from the start, and time has been unhelpfully accurate in confirming those instincts. Now Ted discovers Eva is his daughter and responds with the predictable cocktail of guilt and urgency, attempting to manufacture a relationship on demand, conveniently ignoring the part where Kat has clearly stated she wants no part of it. In that light, Ted sitting at the table and allowing Kat to be criticized or dissected with Eva is not harmless conversation. It is a deliberate minimization of Kat's valid feelings and a neat reframing of her boundaries as cruelty. Bonding with Eva does not require rewriting the past, invalidating Kat, or assigning her responsibility for everyone else's emotional comfort. Kat is allowed to opt out, particularly when no one in the room appears remotely interested in protecting her emotional space. Meanwhile, Leslie is not some cartoon villain. She is an agon, a challenger, weaponizing disruption as a personality trait, and Trisha Grant may as well clear shelf space for next year's Emmy, because the performance is doing the most while pretending it is effortless. Vanessa's endless desperation for Joey has long since crossed from romantic pursuit into a public service announcement about self-respect. As for Daddy Dupree and the woman from the singing group, the storyline continues to behave like it forgot to inform the audience of its own intentions. What looked like harmless gala preparation now reads suspiciously like an affair that refuses to confirm itself, leaving confusion where clarity should be. The staging does not help. Every conversation seems trapped in the hospital lobby, as though the rest of the town has been condemned, while Shanice hovers nearby like an all-seeing corridor fixture, always present, always informed, always conveniently positioned to know everything, and yet, for all the lurking, Ted and Shanice actually work as a pairing. If Nicole can date Carlton, Ted can date Shanice, an arrangement made even easier by the inconvenient fact that Ted and Shanice are likable together, while Nicole and Carlton are not. Speaking of Carlton, his presence is uniquely aggravating, and any romantic investment in him threatens to turn entire scenes into skippable content. Leslie, however, whether branded Dana or anything else, has generated enough chaos to merit a real setback, not because cruelty is entertaining, but because consequences are educational. The stalking of Ted, harassment of Laura, thirsty auditioning for attention at Fairmont Crest, and obsessive pestering of the Duprees has turned her into an exhausting attention seeker masquerading as a misunderstood philanthropist. The selective memory only intensifies the frustration. Ted delivering a sanctimonious apology about the child raised, being hostile to the child never had the chance to love, is remarkable, given that Ted is precisely the reason that chance never existed. Bill did not independently spirit Leslie away. Ted sent him because Ted did not want that baby, and now the narrative expects solemn sympathy for Ted's rewritten history. That expectation is especially bold in an episode that dragged, an hour so listless it managed to make missing Jacob and Isaiah's mother feel less like a mystery and more like mercy. Leslie's contemptuous treatment of Samantha was ugly, even if the resulting put-down was overdue. And the sudden interest in launching a clinic reads less like altruism and more like image management disguised as community service. The financial logic is no better. Somehow, Leslie can buy a multi-million-dollar home above asking price, tear it down, rebuild it, add a wing to the country club, purchase an apartment complex, fund a stranger's surgery, and still casually entertain underwriting a free clinic. Apparently, without ever encountering the concept of limits, budgets, or believable storytelling. At this point, the only thing more inflated than the bank account is the show's insistence that viewers should accept it without blinking.